stuff at night, like,
Yeah.
I think on the
Only
one
participate
Saturday,
according to
they brought out
process.
a big movie screen, and they had movies, kids' movies by the pool.
Nice.
Carl
It's
Williams
cool.
just joined.
But if it just
So-
like it's nice too.
When this is done recording from here, how do I,
How long do you usually go
Maybe
and
a
stay
cloud
at that
under
place?
your.
under
Right,
my
what-
thing,
what's the
even
price
though I
per
didn't have
night?
to put it in,
Host.
even though I didn't have to put the host
I know it's gonna
information in here?
Yeah, like.
Yeah, because the
I
original,
stayed there.
you're the
like, I haven't
original
bought
creator
one,
of the beach.
which is obviously more
Oh,
expensive.
yeah.
so it'll show up in your
Places to go.
profile and it should show
Like a
up
couple
in his,
grand?
or theirs.
Yeah,
for
it's
this
like a
room.
few hundred a night, somewhere in there,
Alright,
depends.
that's doable. I don't mind spending like a couple grand for a week or
Yeah,
something.
but you're better off, like, I haven't taken the kids to Sandboro, you're better off.
Did
like-
you turn off
I mean, you
the,
can, but you're better off, like, just
oh,
renting
you
a
didn't.
house.
Turn off
Like,
the
go to
entry and exit
the
times.
RBO and look for houses down in Clearwater, because
Unless you
it's like a
wanna listen to it
walkable
when somebody
city, you
joins
just
and
walk
dumps
around,
out,
go
you know.
places,
Yeah.
it's fun.
So the objective of this meeting is to share with the steering committee the outline.
I think so.
Unless
You indicate it was not.
Do I really need to be, I mean, that's only entertainment.
Chris, you gotta shut her down, be like, you haven't attended and.
You'd be like, well,
But yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, Clearwater's nice, like it's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
My uncle lives there and I've been there.
Yeah.
Just got a place there.
you can go a little bit further south, like there's towns called like Indian Rocks Beach, Clear Beach, a little bit quieter.
Yeah, I don't know.
Nice, it's down that Gulf Coast highway. Same sort of beaches, just a little bit quieter.
But April's gonna be a little chilly though, right? I mean, water.
I mean, the water will be cool, we have a pool at our house, so, and it's heated.
Gotcha.
So I'm gonna crank that shit, cause I'm paying for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody else's problem.
Mm-hmm.
recording is in progress, open recording meeting.
We went
Sweet.
a couple Februaries ago.
Has joined the meeting. A participant has joined the meeting. Has joined the meeting.
Hi everyone, it's Carissa. Just wanted to go through real quick. Who's calling user number 3?
So that might be me. This is Marion Porterfield.
Hi, Marion.
Hi. I'm, mobile today, so I can't come on my computer.
Hello, Marion.
Hello. Is that Mayor?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I wasn't sure. All right. Hi. I'm taking my mother for her vet.
That's great. Congratulations.
Get cut off there. I couldn't hear what you said.
I said I'm taking my mother for her vaccine, so I can't turn my camera on.
Okay. And I'm going to have to leave this meeting early to go to the Property Disposition Committee meeting. It's a little after 2. Is Chief Clifford on board?
You're on mute, sorry.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everybody.
No, we're off.
Just want to welcome everybody, and again, we're moving down a fairly aggressive timeline, but I think everything is starting to come together so that we'll be able to have all the input, have the Finn Institute, the survey back, the working elements of this group that'll be reduced down, so we'll have a report that'll be comprehensive and reflect all the work that we've done. With that, turn over to Chief Clifford, who's going to go through the agenda today and keep us moving down that line to get things focused toward an end report. Chief Clifford.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're really in the final couple weeks of pulling everything together that our discussions, our communications have gotten us to this point. there's really two things that I wanna talk about, that are most likely going to, maybe generate some conversations, but before I get to that, I just kinda wanna give a little brief summary of where we're at right now. One of the things I plan on talking about is a draft report outline that we have, that we've sent out to everybody. And what this is, it's because of our crunch timeline, we're at the police department and the command staff level, we are working to pull together a lot of different things that have emerged through these conversations. And we are also in discussions with the Fin Institute on where they're at with the report that they are generating. And we've come to the conclusion that once their report is done, we want to make sure that everything that's come on that we've listed as a result of these conversations is going to be covered in their report. And if it isn't, then we are going to have it ready to be embedded in their report. So the final version is going to be one report that is going to be presented to the steering committee for review. And that report will have recommendations that we have come up with. It will then be sent to the steering committee for your review and further recommendations that you may have. Because this timeline is crunched, we want to present to you what our outline is so that you can start thinking about the whole process leading us up to this point. And if you have anything that you feel that you might want to make sure that we're covering, by all means, either bring it up during this hour or send us a separate email to the collaborative email that everybody has, asking us if we have this covered, or just engaging us with your thought on it. If you have a recommendation, it's never too soon to send us a recommendation. Like I have a recommendation that this would be a good idea to address this, as we are pulling them all together, and they will be embedded into the final report that will then be presented to the council. On our end, we wanted to get a little bit of a structure in place to start with. So we did a table of contents that included an introduction and an interview or overview of what led us to this point. It started off with the executive order, and then the formation of this steering committee, the partnerships that we formed as far as building out the stakeholder engagement piece of the steering committee, our request for the Fin Institute to be our research partner, and then the role of the city council in all of this. We wanted to make sure that we had a really good description of our process overview or process review that we did as a part of these steering committee meetings, and that we wanted to make sure that every topic that we discussed and had conversations about is covered in the report. We documented the emerging themes that we saw start to percolate through the conversations. It doesn't mean that the emerging themes that we have are all of them. These are just the ones that we picked up on, and we want to make sure that what comes in this report at least is transparent in what we do at the police department as it relates to these emerging themes. So when we see an emerging theme of transparency in the police department, and we want to make sure that communication and how we communicate within as a police department is communicated thoroughly in this report. So it may not be something that we had a long conversation about as much as educational, as far as this is how the police department currently communicates, and you'll be able to read it and understand it and possibly give recommendations if there's any shortcomings as far as that recommendations go. So that's the draft outline that we have right now. And I think at this point right now, I think we should just open it up for discussions on this outline to see what everybody's thoughts are, and as the process has been evolving, and to answer any questions that anyone may have at this point.
Thanks, Chief. I'm assuming that section 4 is where we're gonna have policy recommendations.
That's correct.
Okay,
All the recommendations will be there. There's none added there yet. We, on our end, we're still putting them together. And then the Fin Institute, as they are going through analyzing everything, writing their report, we've asked them if they come up with any recommendations, just to go ahead and embed them in there. And again, all of the recommendations are going to be for the steering committee to review and approve before they go to the council at large, and then ultimately it's gonna be up to them to approve them.
And Chief, I just add as a bit of a footnote, is that for our part of the report, you'll see just before the appendices, the last section of the report that we're planning, it's labeled implications, and I know that might be a little bit cryptic at this point in time. That will be a synthesis of both what Sarah derives from the community conversations and the survey, the way of what amount to recommendations or suggestions or proposals for change, as well as those that we identify from our review of SPD strategies, programs, policies, and so forth. And as we synthesize those, we will, where it's appropriate, contrast them or compare them with the evidence base. I mean, if the evidence base supports partially or wholly a particular suggestion or recommendation, then we'll certainly note that. If the evidence base contradicts it, we'll note that. If the evidence base is silent, then we'll just say there really isn't any evidence on this.
Thank you, Dr. Warden.
Yep.
Hey, Chief, this is Carl Williams. I had some suggestions, but just to Dr. Warden's point, I imagine that building trust section is your component for the Fin Institute. Am I correct?
Well, certainly we plan to write in that section both about procedural justice and what we learned, and you all might have heard about when Sarah and I presented on this last fall, what we learned in a project on that topic at SPD a few years ago, and we'll address the prospects for building trust by way of community policing and problem solving, another topic that we addressed in our presentation. We'll elaborate a little bit on that in the report.
Gotcha. My question is, I'm in no position to give you any work. You're definitely at a different position than I am. I wanted to know, would you be able to, though, highlight where the community kind of develops their assessments of police departments? I know you just said that you're going to be summarizing the community input, and then as I'm reading from the introduction, the community conversation is looking at the survey responses. I think it would be beneficial to kind of capture how individuals assess policing, and that it's not entirely from first impressions. It might be from a variety of sources. I don't have the statistical or the research to support that, but I would be willing to see that included if you have that readily available to include in the report.
Yes, thanks, Carl. We will be discussing at least what the research says about the formation of public attitudes toward the police, how people evaluate their interactions with the police as it relates to building trust. That was one of the key findings from the research that we did in Schenectady, in fact. And I would add, and I neglected to mention, that we will have at least another place where we address the issue of building trust, and that will be something I take near and dear to your heart with respect to external oversight, since there is some evidence, not a large volume of evidence, but some evidence that where the citizenry plays a role in the review of complaints against the police, that there is a bit more trust and among members of the public in the complaint review process. So we'll certainly tag that in connection with that section.
Outstanding. I had some other suggestions, but I'll just allow other people to kind of speak up.
You should probably go ahead, Carl.
All right. If you wouldn't mind scrolling back to the top, I wanted to have a clear understanding of where this report is going to be going, because one of the suggestions that I had in the section 1, kind of under the Schenectady Reform Reinvention Collaborative Process, to me, if I was someone who is not aware of what's been going on, I would assume that this process ends after the draft plan, which is not correct, because we're going to be having conversations extend to the city council. Would we be able to include that component as well? Or is this not being presented to the public? Is this just for the steering committee? I guess that question was kind of for anyone that had the answer.
Yeah, I guess, or what you're saying, Carl, is that you're asking that, how will we make the report clear to the reader that the report will then go to the city council before approval? Is that your question?
Yep, because in that section or component, it says the timeline, but unless that's clearly outlined in the timeline phase, to me, reading this, the process ends after this plan is drafted. Yep.
You're talking section 2 in the bullet points?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we could, I would imagine in the narrative, it will say that, but we could add that bullet point so it's a little bit clearer that the draft plan really goes to the steering committee and then to the council for final approval. It won't even be a draft, well, yeah, I guess it will be a draft plan. Plan won't be final until it's accepted by the council and voted on.
And the reality of the process is it goes down this path, there's going to be less and less changes, so that everybody should have had their input. And even though we kind of look at the city council as the last entity, if they have ideas or comments now, you know, there's been discussion going forward. Some of those things are going to be incorporated earlier. It's not like there's going to be a report that comes out at the end, and then we're going to add the city council's position on something or their thoughts on something. They may very well make some modifications to it, but their input or ideas should be incorporated and have been incorporated as we're going through this whole narrative.
Absolutely, and thanks for that clarification, Mayor. My second, and I only have 2 more. My second one was I thought it would be beneficial to include Jason Benitez's bio in the partnership and stakeholder segment. I imagine that having a understanding of what made him a viable moderator clearly outlined. I know it's in the appendix section that we're going to include a lot of his, I guess, doctrine for how the conversation would be structured, but I thought he had like a snippet that he would say before each conversation. I don't know if we should include that at the beginning, kind of as an identifier as to why he was selected and why he was a good selection. I just come from the standpoint of if it's not documented, it's not outlined, can't leave anything up to assumption. And then lastly, I really valued Chief Clifford and the Schenectady Police Department's your PowerPoint slides during the kickoff conversations. I thought that gave a really good snapshot of where the police department was and what your expectations were for these conversations. I would like to see that included in the appendix, or at least referenced somewhere. I definitely don't think that should be left out. And I believe it's available on your website, but I thought that provided a lot of it highlighted where you were as a department and kind of where you wanted to go with these conversations. And that's it.
All excellent points, Carl. Thank you for that. Yeah, we'll
A
definitely
participant
add that,
has
add
left the
Jason
meeting.
and his selection as the moderator in there. We definitely would have mentioned him in the narrative about how we got to that point, but I think I like your idea about putting his background in there and really the reason why we selected him in there, because I think it is important. And the PowerPoint definitely was an oversight because it is important. It's really how we kicked off this whole this whole steering committee. There's a lot of information in that PowerPoint that was a foundation upon which these conversations were held. Anybody else have any questions or any topics they want to bring up?
I mean, overall, I think the outline is fine. I think the key thing is really getting the material in there, specifically the outcomes from the conversations, right, and the survey. So,
Okay. All right. Did you email the use of force, or can you put that up there?
I'll put it, yeah, I can bring it up.
We we're gonna share another document, and I'll give you a little background on this too. And we had previously communicated and discussed our use of force policy and the form that's attached to it. And it's taken us a little while to get to the point where we're at, but this is a draft version of a form that we would like to, implement probably within the next couple months on what we report when force is used on an individual. And we recently entered into an agreement with a company called Benchmark to give us a one-stop shop for all data surrounding an officer. But within that software is the ability to electronically capture data on using force. And while this may appear to be a PDF, because it is, our thought process is that we want to put this information into the Benchmark product so that it is electronically submitted, and it gives us a better way to analyze the data once it's captured. And the reason we're sharing this with you is to see that we have put a little bit more thought into what we're asking our officers to fill out when force is used, and that we want to present it to the steering committee for review and feedback. Get your thoughts on what's in there. See if you pick up on anything that we're missing, and really help us walk through this whole process. Because where we're going with this is that we want to be able to report to the community the force that's being used, and we want to be able to report that force in a manner that's better understood by the community. During this process, we had our use of force report that we had generated by our analyst, which was very time consuming. And we even found some pitfalls in our collection of data where there wasn't an appropriate box to check, so officers would check something and write something in. So we found gaps in our data where I wasn't happy with what we were self-reporting to ourselves. So we're trying to close those gaps by giving more areas to check. And we want to really be able to report back to the community how many times we use force. And we, in my opinion, we over-report right now because we'll fill this form out if we handcuff somebody who's resisting being handcuffed. So we call it resistant handcuffing, where it's my belief that some other communities don't report that. So we may appear to have more force used than other communities. So in full transparency, moving forward, what I'd want to do is report to the community, this is how many times we've used force. This is how many times we've used force when you remove resistant handcuffing. So, and you know, this data would be available for anybody to be able to look at and even filter themselves to see different things, how many times, you know, certain things have been done. So, you know, this is something that we will be putting in as a recommendation. And, so it doesn't necessarily have to be approved by the time that we get this report done, but this will be embedded in as a recommendation. And, you know, the feedback that the steering committee can give us on this will certainly be appreciated. I know that we're just sharing this with you now. I'm not expecting you to be prepared to ask any really good questions, but if anybody has any now, we'll certainly open it up.
Hey, Chief, this is John Palomeni.
Hi, John.
Quick question for you. Would there be a way to link this with maybe, I know there's HIPAA laws and so forth, but have some sort of link with this with a hospital, you know, yes, this is what happened. No, it didn't happen. Just so that there's some more, you know, some proof or some help towards saying, yeah, this is exactly the case. And yes, this was just a person moving and their wrists were hurt, or this happened from, you know, a takedown, or this was a pre-existing injury, because I did see that on the list. So that might help with some of the transparency aspects if there's a way around, you know, some of that to at least include that into the software piece.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the answer on that, but something that we could certainly look into and ask.
I have a question about, so say people are, or however these are reported and sent in, what is the accountability process after something like this is reported? Moving forward, what is the policy change towards further accountability and transparency with actual accountability being presented, given a serious use of force or considerable use of force?
As of right now, all of these reports are reviewed by a supervisor and they have to be signed off by a supervisor. And in addition to that, and that's frontline supervision, in addition to that, all these reports get directly sent to our Office of Professional Standards for a secondary review. And there's been many times where the Office of Professional Standards, if something just doesn't seem right to them, they will look at it a little bit further. So, so that's our oversight right now, on how these reports are done. The transparency part of it is, you know, what we plan to do is again, be able to provide, you know, to the community. And I'm not sure what form this will be. It may very well be on our website, the data on the use of force. And I feel like there was another question in there that I may not have answered. And it's well, is there something else that you wanted to know about that I haven't answered yet?
Yeah. So the oversight, I can see that. But what does accountability actually look like? So say this is reported and it's seen and it's reviewed. What does the implementation of accountability look like? And in regards to like the CPRB and stuff, when or how are we going to maintain integrity within the various forms of accountability and transparency that we're looking to put forward? Like, are we going to be removing police from police review boards? Not like specifically the steering committee, but when trying to find accountability and how we implement that, like how do police like fellow police officers come into play in the conversations around and the review of use of force or inappropriate activity by other officers, and how can we make that more equitable? So I guess my general question is, what does that accountability actually look like after it's been reviewed and it's been looked over and stuff like that? And then how are we maintaining integrity in providing that accountability through consequence of action?
That is one of the reasons why we purchased this benchmark software, is that it's an officer profile, so it's going to give us a better snapshot of a certain officer and how many times force has been used. And I don't think it's fair to just look at one officer and say, well, this officer has used force 10 times and this officer has used 0 times. Certainly the officer where force has been used 10 times gets our attention, and then when we look at it closer, we may realize that that officer has a job that's more proactive than reactive. That officer might have a job where they go to emotionally disturbed person calls more often than other officers go. So the profile for the officer will help us with the accountability stage to be able to identify whether a trend is starting, or whether there's some kind of a red flag that we're indicating that further training might be needed right away, or if an officer is using more force at times when it's not appropriate. So the software is going to help us have a better idea and a snapshot and early warning detections for the officers. And as far as the more serious incidents, this is really something that's on. I really even hesitate to even want to say that we're going to be able to get to it really soon, but we have a draft policy right now that we're currently working on to have a use of force review board for major, and this is going to be for serious injuries to members of our community, where we actually have this use of force review board review the use of force and give recommendations to the command staff on that. And when I say it's at the early stages, it's a policy that was presented to us by Lexipol, who is our policy, who we go to for our policies. And before we just adopted it and implemented it, we wanted to take some time really to wrap our heads around it, to see if this is something that we can implement here. And we were on the path of doing that before this entire project here through the governor's executive order was implemented. So that's kind of gotten sidetracked. The fact that we're not moving forward with it right now doesn't mean that we're not going to. It's just that it's going to take a lot of review on our end to be able to look at it. The last point that I wanted to make, as far as colleagues, watching over colleagues, is that the program that we recommended or discussed and will be recommending that we're going to move forward with, which is ABLE, the Active Bystandership Program, where officers are going to be trained on and really encouraged to step in if they feel another officer is doing something wrong or using too much force. That program there, is really the solution to that question of oversight. Whereas we're going to have management oversight, which what I started off explaining that we have through these forms, and then we're going to have the ground level colleague oversight through the ABLE program. Did that answer your question, Michaela?
Some of them, thank you. One final question, and I'll try to make it brief. I don't want to take too much space from anybody else. Within some of the 13 demands that I did send in the chat, and I know you've seen them, they've been proposed to you as well and the mayor. There's one specific point, and I can't remember which number it is, so I'm not going to try to do that, but about what is seen from police officers on social media. So now that we're having this discussion about what accountability looks like and what oversight looks like, say, because it happens here, it happens across the nation, and we're here for transparency and honesty, so I'm going to be honest about it. What does it look like if you see harmful comments on social media accounts from officers? What does that accountability look like? Because that goes into what the internal I don't know what word to say, the internal kind of how things work and function within the police department, if that's the belief systems that people are coming into. Say you're seeing racist comments or harmful comments about gender and stuff like that from police officers or people you work with, what would that accountability process look like? Because there are demands from the community about maintaining that racial justice and equity is really a poignant topic to be discussed in regards to what accountability looks like. So do you have an answer for that?
Yes. The number you're referring to, I'll just read it so just everybody knows what you're referring to. It's number 3. It was automatic firing for all racist texts, emails, letters, social media posts, phone calls, and so-called private conversations by any law enforcement officers or correction officers. We have a couple of different policies in place right now that covers everything that's listed in that request, that number 3. From we have a social media policy that covers anything that's being done on social media. That policy has been enforced by the police department, and anything that any officer were to write on social media that we find to be not in line with our values, brings discredit upon the agency, we will address, and we have addressed in the past. As far as everything else between racist text messages, emails, letters, phone calls, we have standards of code of conduct that we employ here. Anything that would come to our attention in regards to that would be dealt with not only swiftly but very seriously. Most likely would result in separation from this agency.
Thank you.
Welcome. I will plan on bringing up the use of force form next week during our meeting, just so everybody has an opportunity to look at it. But again, if you want to send emails, if you can't make the meeting, if you want to send emails, for sure, please send those. And I apologize we didn't get that out sooner. It was supposed to go out with everything else, but this one was missed. So, anybody else have any more questions about the things that we brought up, or anything else in general? All right.
Oh, I mean, if no one else is gonna say anything, I missed a couple meetings, so I just wanted to catch myself up. And I'll try to be short-winded. But my question, my last and final question, truly this time, is so the conversation. Look, I'm just again gonna be honest. This whole thing started because George Floyd was murdered. And I think that's something that we need to continuously acknowledge. And I think that a lot of us have done a good job in acknowledging the reason that we're here. This is an executive order that's been given to police departments across the state and across the nation in various different ways. And it's important that we uphold and honor to the lives that have been lost. And I don't think that we're doing too much of a bad job doing that. However, there is a call, and I'm not saying this from my own point of view, although I do agree, but there's a call from the community for immediate action. Like George Floyd died last year. Other people died last year, Breonna Taylor. These people, these names that have been brought up, that is the sole purpose and reason that we're here. So I understand that there have been specific kinds of chokeholds banned. I believe in Schenectady or perhaps across the Albany and Capital District, I'm not sure. But there are other uses of force that can be banned immediately. And I've been asked by a lot of people why those things haven't been enacted in, like, just off the bat without discussion about them, because there shouldn't be too much discussion about them according to the community. I mean, beyond chokeholds, there's hog ties, there's all these other things that have caused harm to people, not specifically in any recent measure of time here with SPD, maybe, at least not that I've seen reported. But these are things that can be done immediately. And if we're having a conversation about
Has
building
left
trust,
meeting.
why are we waiting to do certain things so that we can have a conversation about them when hog ties and stuff don't just harm Black people? They would harm anyone who experiences them. And I think that there is enough power here to enact policy immediately. Well, sure, there are things that we need to have a further discussion on so that we're being equitable to all the members of the community. But there are things that, if there was an immediate change, would be equitable to an entire community, to the entire community of Schenectady and everywhere else. So a lot of people are asking, like, why is there not pressure being applied, not from the people, but from the police force or the mayor or the city council in changing things immediately when there has been an uprising in this area and there has been an uprising nationally, pushing for certain things that, while some things need a grander discussion, certain things don't. So like, where does that power lie, and why is it not being used if we're really talking about building trust? Because had certain things been banned immediately, people would have more trust in this process. I have a strong belief that this meeting and these collections of meetings in this group can move things forward for the safety and betterment of everyone in the community. But I also think that there's been some time wasted with certain things that we can enact now, or we could have enacted months ago. Banning chokeholds, or I mean hog ties, and banning other harmful things like shooting and moving cars, no-knock warrants. These things could have been done immediately, and I think there would be much more trust behind this. So to those who do have the power to enact that, whether that be the chief or the mayor or whomever, can you answer why those things haven't been done immediately?
Well, I can address the hog tie and the lack of us coming out and banning it immediately, because it was never authorized and it's been banned all along. Our policies that are posted on our website clearly state that they're not allowed. They've never been allowed. So that's the reason why we haven't come right out. In our opening PowerPoint, that was communicated that they've never been allowed. As far as strangleholds, they've never been allowed either. Chokeholds were allowed. Chokeholds were banned. And when the incident that happened in July occurred, we took the immediate action to further stop officers from using their knees to hold a person's head down. That action, by the way, was not only taught by the state, but written in a state lesson plan. But we took the immediate action to actually stop that, because we recognize that while it may have been approved by the state and it may be have been an appropriate technique, the image was harmful and it didn't need to be done. And we would have to then train our officers to otherwise accomplish what they were trying to accomplish without using a knee to the head. So I respectfully would like to say that where we have the ability to make immediate changes, we are trying to do so. But you have to also respect the fact that within an organization, it's not always easy to just snap your fingers and make change. A lot of times there's policies that need to be written, there's laws that need to be taken into consideration, and that there's training that needs to be involved before you could just affect change, especially when it comes to doing the kind of work that we do, which isn't always easy, and sometimes it's also dangerous. So, I absolutely welcome any questions that anybody has, and the feedback too. And I think that this dialogue is good. And don't feel like that had to be your last question, Michaela. If you have any more, shoot them at us. This is what we're here for.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or even comments as it relates to a couple of the things that were brought up?
Definitely, I think it's worth mentioning. This is Carl Williams again. Although this task force was enacted for the sole purpose of adhering to Governor Cuomo's mandate, I've had the opportunity and luxury of meeting a lot of other like-minded individuals within the community. So I would definitely urge people to establish contacts that exceed outside of these 1 hour meetings, because there's definitely value in a lot of impactful people who show up every week. So definitely take it upon yourselves. I don't put myself in a position to tell people what to do. I kind of lead by example. So definitely reach out. I message people throughout these meetings, but definitely make sure you're making the most of this, because after April, it'll then be upon ourselves to continue these conversations. So.
Thank you, Carl, and I agree with that. You know, we're all working towards a goal right now, which is to have a report ready and approved by April 1st. But that's not where the conversations are going to end, because I can tell you that personally, I've gotten a lot out of these conversations, especially from every individual that's on this call and then some. You know, I know everybody's got busy lives, and you're volunteering your time and day to be here right now, but you know, we've definitely, this has been a good experience for us as far as reflecting upon what we're doing and taking into consideration the reason that we're here, which is really, you know, we have it written on our whiteboard, I'll read it, which is to reduce any racial disparities in policing. That's our end goal here, and that's why we're looking at everything that we're doing. We're looking to promote, you know, community trust, fairness, accountability, and transparency. So, you know, we're continuously reminding ourselves that that's why we're here. That's why we're talking about these things. And as themes emerge from the community and their perception of how we're doing our job, these are the things we're keeping in mind as we move forward. And we're doing our best to keep taking one step ahead every day. It's just that, you know, it's a process. And we hope that's recognized by everybody on the board, that we're moving forward. We're not standing still or going backwards. Anything else? Anybody have any questions? All right. Do we have anything else, Carissa, to go over?
I don't think so. I was gonna send out a reminder email to everyone. The survey closes on the 15th, and also just a couple of notes of where to find more, you know, of our resources on the collaborative website portion of the police department's website on the city, which has our kickoff PowerPoint, and then the videos of all of the community conversations, and as well as the police department's policy manual as well. So I'll just send out a quick email reminder after this, along with the use of force form that we went over today too, for you guys to comment and take a look at.
Is Jason on the call doing that?
No.
No. Okay. All right. It's 2:45. I guess we're going to end the meeting. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back next Wednesday at 2:00. I hope that you can join us, as the next couple meetings are going to be important ones as we inch forward. And as always, we appreciate your time and efforts. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.